Good fiction has the power to change perspectives, to push us to consider things that we have never before, broadening our horizons and enlightening us about the world and its need for change. And Brotherless Night by V.V. Ganeshananthan is a perfect example of the good fiction phenomenon. This is without doubt one of my favorite novels that I read this year so far. It's chilling, inspiring, perceptive, ambitious. This is a novel that is completely and utterly alive. The story lives and breathes, and we do along with the characters. We exhale in relief when a loss has been avoided. We hold our bated breath to see what happens next. In its narrative, the scope is tremendous, and it's the first time this year that I have fully seen a novel realize its ambitions and drives. There is a capability in this brilliant narrative style that precisely manages to handle this incredible story with care. At its core, this is a simple story of a young woman named Sashi who would like to become a doctor. She studies hard, she's preparing to take her advanced levels exams, but suddenly she finds herself and her life turned upside down by the outbreak of civil war in Jaffna. At first, it's merely tales of anti-Tamil violence in neighboring villages, the police taking matters into their own hands, enforcing what punishments they see fit in order to take revenge for the killing of their own. They're burning and pillaging, and the civilian community is forced into hiding, but these are occasional outbreaks when an event can trigger it. But as all great tragedies start with small things, eventually it escalates. Not riding bikes for fears of violence because the police think that young men on bicycles are dangerous, especially young Tamil men who can get around faster. Speaking English rather than Tamil to avoid suspicion, and most importantly, rushing back home after school to avoid being thrown into a dangerous situation. Resentment fosters alongside fear as the community is forced to worry again and again for their lives and the lives of their loved ones. But as time passes, that resentment grows into something more, and young men start disappearing one by one. Some are arrested without reason by the government, some are persecuted and punished because of their nationality, while others still begin to retaliate and fight against the government with their own methods. More and more so, boys join the resilience movement, and recruitment happens everywhere. Nowhere is there a place where you're truly safe, whether it's school, home, playground. A boy comes up and then the two boys go off and the two boys disappear and they join the resilience movement. It's inescapable, and Sashi is left to worry for the safety of her own brothers. Her dreams of medicine seem increasingly even more distant, but still she longs to help her community. As Sri Lanka's civil war moves into its brutal, relentless peak, the war after all stretched for 3 decades, for 30 years, the day fades away and it seems to give way to one long brotherless night. Left alone, Sashi is forced to confront her own morals and values, ask herself where she stands in questions of nationalism, resistance, and feminism. She is forced to question her own values and morals. Yet Sashi's not the only one. As V.V. Ganeshananthan eloquently weaves her story, the reader too is driven to consider their own values and their own role. The book begins, "I recently sent a letter to a terrorist I used to know." Then it continues, "We were civilians first. You must understand, that word, terrorist, is too simple for the history we have lived, too simple for me, too simple even for this man. How could one word be enough? But I'm going to say it anyway, because it is the language you know, and it will help you to understand who we were, what we were called, and who we have truly become. We begin with this word, but I promise that you will come to see that it cannot contain everything that has happened. Someday the story will begin with the word civilian, the word home." Thus she's right. This word cannot contain all that has happened, the same way that this review cannot contain all of the incredible emotion that we experience, all of the astounding events that this book is, all of its multitude of definitions. Its character depth astounds, with boundless depth and emotion in each voice. This is a story told by many voices, their desires, their wishes, their aspirations, their lives, their losses, different coping mechanisms, and a desire for a safe future, even if the way that they think the safe future should come about greatly varies. Told in a direct first-person retrospective narrative, it allows us to see the story through Sashi's eyes, except with the unique perspective that only comes from time and experience. From Sashi, older Sashi looking back at her younger Sashi and interceding when younger Sashi has been naive or when she thinks we, as the reader, are being naive. The novel often switches to second person to call us out, to call out our assumptions, our misperceptions, our stereotypes, and yet at the same time to also call that of the writer. In a way, it's a look at the intersection of both, the reader and the writer, and the faults and the roles that both play. This adds a fascinating dimension stylistically to the novel as we both come in close to the story and then are drawn further apart. In a way, I suppose it mirrors Sashi's life, how she's surrounded by this environment of fear, trauma, worry, inescapable confusion. She's unable to leave this state, and yet she continues. She's determined to continue, and similarly, we also get transported into the story and are forced to continue. We cannot tear our eyes away from the page. We cannot but continue reading out of a persistent and passionate need to know and to understand. This makes for an extremely heavy narrative to follow, and it would be reductionist to call it simply engaging. It's more of a necessity for us to try and understand, even if we are fortunate enough to never fully understand. We go on, as Sashi herself says, I want you to understand it does not matter if you cannot imagine the future. Still, relentless, it comes. This is the book to startle you out of apathy. It denies us the complacency and the ease with which we typically look away because it considers not only the emotional aspect of it, but also the academic. It ceases to be something abstract, something you read in the news or in a history textbook, and it becomes something deeply personal. We are driven to always be thinking and analyzing the ways in which what we know is true, the limits of what we know, and in general, our own approaches and what we would do in situations, and in which way we're similar and in which way we're different. It is of particular relevance to current politics too. It's heartbreaking to see the vicious cycle in history of people hurting each other and those who are supposed to protect these people not doing their job. And yet the novel never attempts to force us to pick a side. Like Dr. Rajini Thiranagama, on whom the story is loosely based, it is critical of all the parties involved. And all involved includes us as the reader too. We see that this should not be solely a political conflict or a story reduced to its meager historical facts, but human story that continues onwards, that is still of pressing relevance today. You can call the novel coming of age, or you can call it historical, or even memoir-esque, but at the end of the day that never ends, it is still a story that is simply human. And the book is enlightening not only in terms of its discussion of medicine and the principle of do no harm and academia and the intersections between academia and protest and speaking out and not speaking out and complacency and activism. It's enlightening, of course, due to the conflict itself, because this is not a textbook story. This is not a story gathered from official reports. This is a story of how it was for the community, how it was in their eyes, and it's up to us whether we're going to choose a different source. You see a story that isn't talked about, some even going so far as to refute us, and Sashi simply asks us to listen. And if you're a Bae, you're not simply a better listener or a better reader, but a better and more informed person. You can witness different forms of resistance and ask yourself what you would do. It is not possible to know what you would do, but it is possible to understand yourself and perhaps better change because of it. Just as Sashi experiences one of the best character arcs that I have seen, we too go through change and growth. From a literary perspective, it is an incredibly fine balance between consistency and change and character development and commitment and consistency and stability, but the author draws this line remarkably well. The book keeps its pacing and fluid, natural structure from the front cover to the back, and it is a delight to read, even if the subject itself is far from a cheery and delightful one. Through it, we get a true appreciation of not only the writer's craft but the story itself. The prose is sparse with its emotion, yet somehow the emotion is felt in every word. Just like Sashi at certain moments of the book finds herself blinded with emotion, we too feel an intense sort of passion and rage and commitment to the story. We read with another type of intensity, an intensity that is rarely encountered in bad books. I cannot describe the writing style as lyrical, yet somehow it manages both. Its incisive commentary and simplicity in narrating the events of the novel, but also its tender approach to difficult subject, its use of beautiful and vivid descriptions. This is a novel that will live with you for life if you allow it to, because when you let Brotherless Night take the reins, you fundamentally allow your thoughts to be challenged and perhaps something in you to be changed or something reaffirmed or something strengthened. The truth is, I can talk about this novel for so much longer, but the best review perhaps is to simply tell you to read it for yourself. This is the easiest 5 stars that I have given in a while, and I think that without question, this is the best book on the Women's Prize for Fiction shortlist in 2024, and I deeply, from the very bottom of my heart, congratulate the author and urge you all to give Brotherless Night a read. Thank you so much for watching my review, and I will see you next week.